Meow! I'm Huples Cat. This is video 2 in a series about how I think the governments of the West will respond if a tactical nuclear weapon is deployed by Russia in Ukraine, i.e. if Russia decides to use a nuclear weapon to kill a lot of people in Ukraine horribly. This video series is not speculative about the military response to that, but is speculative about the government's response at home. How will the governments interact with their own populations in the event of a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine?
We've obviously lost our microwave link with Chopper 9. Can someone get on the two-way radio and see if they can contact Ann and see what's going on out there? In the meanwhile, I'd like to, again, caution our audience against over-concern.
I'm going to focus a lot on transport today. Most people expect complete panic when the notification comes on Facebook or however they get their media that a tactical nuke has been used in Ukraine. People expect everybody to immediately start rushing to the grocery stores, stripping all the shelves bare, not going to work and probably fleeing the cities. I disagree. The people of the West are actually a lot stronger and more stable than even our leaders believe. In SHTF after SHTF, the leaders have believed that would happen. Looting, chaos, violence, and have brought the army in to help, to control the population. In SHTF after SHTF, the population has banded together in local networks to thrive and overcome the SHTF. But all of our governments are going to assume widespread civilian panic and act accordingly. What I'm talking about here is one tactical nuclear weapon in the Ukraine. TV, radio, news, most of them immediately are going to switch to pro-government propaganda. Stay at home, stay in place, do not flee, do not use the roads, do not use cell networks, do not go to the grocery store and steal everything. The messaging will be kind of repetitive, but they may actually drag out the old 1980s stuff in the United Kingdom and Canada and America to tell us how to handle a nuclear strike. I do think the major routes may well become military either that day or the next day. By that I mean trains, canals, planes and highway systems will be closed to the general public. It won't happen immediately. People aren't really ready for this. Our governments certainly aren't prepared for it. But at some point, somebody in the Emergency Control Centre is going to go, we need to keep the highways open. I find it highly unlikely for one tactical nuclear weapon that they will disperse fire trucks and ambulance and police cars out of the cities into the rural areas around. They might, and some areas will. If they didn't want to move the fire trucks and the ambulance crews and the police services outside of the major cities, that alone would cause panic, and they're going to be focused on one thing: avoiding civilian panic. Everything is calm, everything is serious, we're looking at it, it's going to be okay. Just stay in place and don't become a nuisance. Of course some local leaders will act, but what does this even mean? Are they going to close the subway systems and the bus systems down immediately to try and stop people fleeing the cities? Are they going to close grocery stores down to stop looting? I doubt it, certainly not in the first day. That gives you an opportunity. It gives you an opportunity to bug out if you have somewhere to go, and it also gives you an opportunity to stock up if you're able to. I would advise having cash. Are they going to open the subway systems and the parking garages as emergency nuclear fallout shelters for us all? I doubt it. They're ill-equipped and not able to be functioning in that capacity, and frankly it would cause panic, and they're going to do everything to avoid panic.
In the meantime, the President has instructed me to urge everyone during these critical hours to remain calm, to stay at home, and to offer their prayers for peace.
Some governments of the West will almost immediately enact sweeping war measures and go on a war footing. To be honest, it's a bit pointless if we're going to have a full nuclear war, but they will. Don't be surprised if gasoline and diesel sales to the general public is ordered stopped. This again, I don't think is going to happen the day of a tactical nuclear strike, and it probably won't happen at all. But if lineups start to form, they're going to just shut them down. They need that gasoline, they need that diesel to fight the war. So the old prepper saying of always fill up your gas tank when it's half full is very true.
The first day of gas rationing in California forced 10 million motorists to line up for hours on end as they tried to fill up their tanks on the allotted day. In Washington, the Senate gave its long-awaited approval to President's rationing plan, which gives him the authority to ration gas in emergencies. The situation in the U.S. is expected to get worse, and that has led to some concern about the prospects of rationing here at home.
They won't be doing gas rationing or anything like that, at least not on a formalised basis, because it won't keep the streets empty, and that's going to be the goal. Keep the streets empty for emergency services.
We will do everything we can to avoid having to to bring in rationing. I believe that our policies will ensure that we are not going to run into the kind of situation which California is faced with today.
Gas rationing also is going to be a way of getting rid of the gasoline that you might need for the war. What you probably will see are the gas stations that remain open, and quite a few of them are going to close down because they're actually ran by very, very low paid workers who are going to go home as soon as this kind of news breaks out and the violence starts to happen on their forecourts. One of the issues will be that if you can get gas, you're going to have to line up for a long time for it, and you're going to get a limited amount. You've actually got other things to do during this period of time rather than sit in a car waiting for gasoline. Our religious leaders are going to actually ask us all to pray for peace and be calm. Anything to keep us off the streets, anything to stop us rioting.
I've been told that outside the United Nations in New York, several thousand demonstrators have surged through barricades.
Some people are going to demonstrate on the streets against the upcoming war, but most of the governments of the West have enactments that means that they can smash those demonstrators to pieces. In fact, if they actually are escalating this and believe it's going to go to war, it's around about this time that you might start to see the first arrests without warrant. They're going to remove known troublemakers from the population. If airlines don't cancel themselves, and I think a lot of airlines will, though the demand to flee is going to be massive, the governments are probably likely to order civil air transport to stop. They're going to need the airlines to transport American and Canadian troops across the ocean to fight the war against Russia. If further incidents occur, I'd expect all highways and trains to actually shut down and be kept for military use only. There's three major reasons I believe this. Millions of people pour out the cities in haste to get away from a possible nuclear bomb. What's going to happen is, if there is no war and there are no bombs, you're going to have tens of millions of people scattered around the countryside with no food and no way to feed them or look after them, out of gasoline, trying to get back to their own lives. And civilization has been stopped by this action. Not paused, but stopped. I'm not going to risk that. Second reason is they're going to keep the transportation for military use. They're about to go on a full war footing. The other main reason is they want people to keep calm and keep functioning. After all, without a civilian population actually working in your factories, you might not be able to fight the war. It's all going to be about continuity of government and fighting the war. For sure, if we're about to go into a full war situation, all civilian air traffic will be stopped. This is going to mean millions upon millions of people are going to be trapped in foreign countries, much like what happened in C-19, but on a much bigger scale. These people are not going to be looked after well in their host countries. They're not going to get the kind of care they got in C-19, and in some countries that care was pretty shoddy. Despite their Facebook pleas if they're allowed, their governments are not going to devote any energy to getting them back to their base countries. Travelling in a time of war or imminent war is a risky thing to do. On top of this, there's going to be a massive refugee wave pouring out of Eastern Europe. People aren't going to stand around in Poland as tactical nukes are being used in Ukraine. They're going to flee west. There will be an overwhelming rush westwards. This is going to overwhelm everybody, and nobody's going to be able to actually be helping much. It's also a good way for Russia to ensure that NATO isn't able to reinforce itself using roads and trains. So they're going to encourage fear and flight. But it won't happen. One of the habitual themes you'll notice in prepper videos is rationing. Rationing of food, rationing of gas, rationing of ammunition. Rationing is an extremely complicated system whereby all producers and all sellers are controlled by the government. This isn't going to happen because a tactical nuclear weapon has gone off in the Ukraine. What you're going to see is informal rationing. Individual grocery stores, individual gas stations, limiting the amount you're able to purchase or limiting how you purchase it. One of the things you might see sellers doing is actually only selling in cash. They may find that their internet connections are so unreliable that they're worried about losing the transaction, and so they actually ask for cash only. In other areas, and I'm thinking kind of rural areas like this, there is like one grocery store in my neighbourhood, and my neighbourhood means it takes me an hour round trip in a car to get there. And if I want to go to a different store, it's going to take me a 2-hour round trip. In those areas where you have local police that are rather intelligent, or specifically local fire services as well, or even owners of the grocery stores who are actually smart, what they might do because of the tactical nuke is literally shut their store to all comers. Now they may let people they know in, but again, tourists and people with cottages are not going to be served. Now, obviously, if it escalates, that's much more likely to happen. But I wouldn't be surprised if some smart store owners do that as soon as they hear a tactical nuke's gone off. So you might find out it's no soup for you.
But this ordinary shopping street has been the scene of a revolution, a social revolution caused by the war, which has changed the buying habits, and therefore the living habits, of the British people as drastically as bombs change their towns.
There was a surge in victory gardens that started about 1938. My granddad had one, and he actually had pigs on his little allotment and grew a whole bunch of food there. The 3 houses at the end of his terrace were hit by a German bomb and completely demolished. And I used to play on that bomb crater as a child. But for him, if you could grow plants, if you could grow rabbits, if you could grow pigs, if you could even have cows, rabbits as well, you could eat them and you could trade them. There was a lot of trading going on. You'd be surprised how you can grow food and where you can grow food. That's not going to happen, is it though? Because we don't have the ability to do that anymore. People don't have the skills to do that. And in the city areas, there is no real grassland available. And if you have the grassland, where are you going to get the water from? And of course, let's not mention the fact that radiation makes growing kind of problematic.
So they cut down their food imports by half. They rationed all basic foods except bread and vegetables. They controlled prices strictly. It put the $1-a-day man on an eating level with a $1-a-year man. There are 4 in the Green family. Their basic rations don't amount to much, but they are sure of getting them every week. 2 pounds of sugar, half a pound each week for everyone, half a pound of tea, 2 ounces each, half a pound of butter, half a pound of lard, and a pound of margarine. That is, 2 pounds of fats for the Green family, 3 ounces of cheese for each person, for cheese is an excellent meat substitute, a box of dried eggs from the United States, and finally, a full pound of bacon. Canned goods, what few there are, and spaghetti, breakfast food, and all that sort of thing, are rationed on the points system. And since all prices are controlled, housewives can afford the cost in money. It's the cost in points that's the problem.
Complex, eh? What about propaganda? YouTube and other media outlets are actually going to almost immediately this happens go into total control mode. The AIs of all of them will actually flick to a different type of an AI, and certain keywords in thumbnails and also in audio or typed onto the thing will be banned. I would expect the NSA to actually have a list of people that they want Google to block all accounts on, and that would happen pretty soon. I wouldn't believe anything you see on the internet, including my own stuff if I can still put it up. In this type of a scenario, it's going to be completely nuts, completely wild. People are going to be very, very speculative. Stick to what you can verify. Ignore most of what's going on in the Ukraine and around you. What you need to be doing is sheltering or moving to shelter and storing as much water as you possibly can and food. Store that as much as you possibly can and get ready for burns, trauma. If you've been in prepping any amount of time this year in 2022, you know what to do. You should have done it. Now you need to do more of it. But Russia's going to be othered and hated. You may have noticed this already happening. They are just people, right? I mean, Ukrainians and Russians are Slavs. They have a common heritage. They actually share common language in a large part of the countries. But they hate each other, and when families go to war, it can be brutal. Our governments will absolutely push the line that Russia is evil. Once you make them non-human, once you make them evil, that justifies dropping tactical nukes on people. Even without further nuclear attacks, cyber attacks from both sides are going to further degrade the internet. Now, both sides are going to see spies everywhere. I do think propaganda as crude as this is unlikely, but I wouldn't be shocked to see it. In the main, it's going to be very subtle, very clever, and very ongoing. Those people out there believe they're awake and everybody else is asleep and they're a wolf and we're a sheep and all the rest of the nonsense they tell themselves to make themselves feel like a real person isn't true. People can easily be manipulated. For example, I would offer the recent death of the 96-year-old Queen of England.
Front page of the Daily Mail this morning, and nothing seems real anymore. Mourners told not to travel as the queue for the Queen reaches 24 hours. Long ago, Britain developed the ultimate test of a person's character, and it's the queue. There are 2 types of celebrities. People are publicly shaming people on the Twitter. And everyone's going, I never felt more British in my entire life. Look at them down there. Philip Schofield and Holly. They're queue jumpers. They jumped the queue.
Yes, England. Because what happened with her is that there was a consensus broke out almost immediately. You had to be very calm, quiet and upset. The 96-year-old billionaire had died. Anybody who diverted from that line was othered and hated viciously and aggressively. Much the same thing will happen if a tactical nuke is dropped on the Ukraine by Russia. You 100% support any and all actions to destroy the evil that is Russia, or you are Russian. This must not happen, but...
Well, maybe history's been trying to tell us something, that superpowers, great powers anyway, cannot go time and again to the brink without eventually going over. This is the way World War I got started, not a sudden, deliberate onslaught by one great power against another. I don't think any of the great powers in 1914 really wanted it, but it was a procession, a process. One event leading to the next event, to the next, all of it getting worse, and the leaders of the time did not have the will or the wisdom to intervene and stop that process. It could have been stopped. Many wars could have been stopped that way. And if the present leaders can't intervene in this situation and back up and stop it, then God will have to forgive them, because there won't be anybody else around to do it.
The next video in this series is going to be the third and last one. In it, I'm going to talk about my own personal preps. There's huge areas I haven't discussed here about schooling and about water supply and a whole bunch of issues. I do encourage you, of course, in the comments to add your own input to this. Until then, thanks for watching. Slava Earth. Be safe, be sane, be careful, but get prepped. This is no joke. Toodles. This video has been brought to you by Wolfie Terrier Productions 2022. Okay, baby boy.